Hello and welcome back to another Island 54 development stream where I'm working on my survival crafting MMO. Uh, Yesterday I was working on netcode and I'm going to continue that work today. This is client-side netcode I've been working on. Uh, I started to get a little bit distracted yesterday with a lack of food and I was kind of going off on a bit of a silly direction. I suspected I was at the time. I was just kind of trying to write code without thinking about it at all, and none of it really made a huge amount of sense. I'm just going to check that we have indeed gone live. It looks like we have. Just check that YouTube is also live. That does look live. Excellent. I'll also try and re-enable chat today. That'll only take me a moment. Broadcast chat, show it. There we go. That looks like it is working. Hopefully that stays working. That was playing up a bit yesterday. So what I've been working on is getting the chunk invalidation acknowledgements working. I did fine yesterday getting client-side acknowledgements working, but the chunk invalidation acknowledgements are a little bit more complicated. And so what I ended up doing yesterday afternoon is just writing up just a couple of notes. I decided that this was going to be easier to implement as a state machine, but it's a state machine per chunk invalidation, or at least per chunk. Now, the reason this is not trivial is because we don't want to fetch new data for a chunk every time we see a chunk invalidation, because we may already have one in progress, or we might have fetched a chunk invalidation and acknowledged it back to the server, but the server might not have seen our packet yet. So in that case, we also don't want to keep on refetching the chunk data. So let's just pull up a new Excali draw window. Just drag that off. That was the state machine for my mouse drag in the Brecky's Game Jam. I'll just junk that, confirm. Okay, so the very first thing that happens when a message comes in, is there no white background? It's a little strange. Well, let's do blue then. Blue, blue. Fill. All right, so this is our initial state. The very first thing that happens is we get a message from the server saying that there's been a chunk invalidation. So on invalidation, I'll call it. Invalidation. Excellent. Excuse me while we just kind of get this all looking a bit nicer. There we go. Now this first state is then going to be the state that we're in when we believe we are fetching an invalidation. Fetching a chunk, sorry. And so I will call this state here centered. There we go. We'll just call this one fetching. So this is the state where we are in the process of going off and grabbing some data from the server. Now, if we receive extra on chunk invalidations in here, then we can ignore them because we're already fetching a chunk. We're going to acknowledge this. Oh, let's put a, sorry, it all over the place here. I just want to put a parameter on here. This is going to have two things. It's going to have a message ID and it's going to have a chunk coordinate. Let's just get this a bit shorter. We'll make that ID, chunk. That's the message ID and the chunk coordinate. when this fetches, when we're fetching, we are going to be sending back an acknowledgement to say that, yes, we have processed a chunk invalidation for this ID and this chunk. If we get another on-chunk invalidation method, then we just want to ignore it. We don't want to override the ID because the server, we only know that we're fetching data after this one. And if we get another packet come in with a different message ID, we don't know that we're going to get the correct version of the data for that one. So the guarantee we're making here is that we'll fetch data that is no older than the message that was sent to us when we started fetching. So that's the guarantee. So we ignore extra on-chunk validation messages. So I'll even put that in here. I'll just do it like that. I'll do this alt click. But in here, we are going to do an action which is going to be just ignore. We're just going to ignore that data. So what happens when we get a result in? Down here, in this case, we're going to do an on result. So this is once we get some data back, and this is going to be all the entity data is going to come back with it. There we go. Now at this point, we're going to send an acknowledgement off. So this is going to be act. So we send, from this point forward, we just repeatedly send an acknowledgement for this chunk invalidation, for this ID and this chunk. We just keep on sending that back to the server on every single tick. Again, if we get another message coming in from the server saying that that chunk has been invalidated, we still don't want to fetch it because we don't know yet that the server has seen our acknowledgement. And so there's just no point in us doing another fetch. It's just going to confuse things. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to have a third state down in here, which for now I'm just going to call fairly dodgy name. I think this state's actually going to go away. I'm going to call this act. So this is saying that the server has acknowledged our act packet. Now at this point, let's just do on act from server. So once the server acknowledges a packet that we have sent one of these acts in, at that point we know that the server has updated our state. It will likely stop sending us the on-chunk invalidation messages there unless stuff has changed since we last fetched it. So in this state, we can now start processing as normal. So we can actually get rid of this one. And instead, we actually come back into the default state again. So there we go. So I think that's the state machine I want to implement. There are a couple of conditions in here though. So in here, let's just zoom in a bit. Here we go. In this one, I probably shouldn't have done this on its side, but yeah, in fact, I'll turn this around so that we can read it a bit more easily. There we go. So in this one, we're going to emit an invalidation ACK. No, let's make it an emit client message, and this is going to have some sort of a client message ID. And somewhere in here, it's going to have the new, it's going to have a chunk invalidation ACK using the original ID and the chunk. So this is just saying, yeah, we're going to make sure that we send out a message at some point. This client ID is just some random ID. We'll get, but it's important that we know what that is. And then, can I come across here? I can. And it's going to have an acknowledgement for this chunk invalidation in it. Now, importantly in here, we only send this state back if we receive an ACK from the server for the client message ID. If we don't get an ACK for this particular for one of these client IDs that that we've sent out, then there's just no point in. Well, we have to stay in this ACT state because they still haven't ACT our client, our chunk invalidation acknowledgement. Sorry, a bit all over the place there. My naming could probably do with a bit of work, but this is definitely what I want to implement. Now, the other problem I have here is we will be emitting a message on every single tick from while we're in here. We will continue emitting one of these messages, but we'll have a new message ID every single time we send a new message, right? So we'll actually have lots of these client MIDs. So what I need to do next is design the class or the interface or whatever that's going to manage this. So let's get started on that. Pull this out a bit. Writing won't be all that easy to read, but I can zoom back in if needed. Get Ryder up. Hello, whoever just joined on Twitch recently. Currently working on the client-side netcode for my MMO. Working in a fairly difficult piece that handles sending bulk data through a back channel, so not over our main UDP channel, and making sure that the client and server stay in sync, so that we always know, the server always knows what the client can see. Okay, so I think that most of this code I did yesterday, as I said, I really wasn't focusing. I think most of this is going to go. I'm just going to rename this package to be .old. I suspect that's going to go away, but if I do need any of it, I can bring it across. I'm going to create a new directory called invalidation. I'm just going to start creating just a couple of basic classes. So we do need an enum chunk invalidation ACK state. No, let's make it client invalidation state, because this isn't just for the acknowledgements, this is also for the fetching. And these can either be fetching or ACT. There's no need for any way to represent this initial state or idle state, because we just won't have a state for it. It's just we're not going to keep track of every single chunk. Only the chunks that we're currently processing chunk invalidations for. Okay, now I need another class in here. This probably needs to be two different classes, but I'm going to have a class to actually just control this entire machine. It will be able to get messages whenever It'll get messages whenever data comes from the server. It will get messages for, well, it'll call out to something to do the actual fetching of chunks. This class will only handle, it'll be an instance of it will only handle the invalidations for a single chunk. So there'll be multiple instances of this. All right, so I'm going to call this a chunk invalidation processor. Resisting the temptation to call it manager. It's a bit of a almost a meme that software developers like to call everything a manager. What's this complaining about? I already have something called chunk invalidation processor. I do. And I'm actually going to get rid of that. That's not useful code. All right. This won't compile in Unity, by the way. I do need to work out how to change the version of .NET in... Hello, welcome back, Yoshi Boy. I need to work out how to turn down the version of .NET being used by Rider. Rider change .NET version. It looks like I've tried doing this before. How to change .NET framework. All right, I'm just going to look at toolset and builds, see if there's an option in there, because this is, there's a version of .NET that supports these namespaces just being a single declaration. And hey, handler. Thank you, Yoshi Boy. Yeah, handler's a better name. It handles the chunk invalidation requests. It's another overused term, handler, but it's better than processor in this case. All right, yeah, so I'm getting invalid code coming out of Rider. Settings, tools, settings, no, build, execution, deployment. Yeah, I want to change the language level. Languages and frameworks. C# interactive, I don't know what that is. I really wish I knew how to do this. No, not version control. No. Rider C# namespace Unity. Oh, is it a code formatting thing? Editor, code style, C#. I'm going to give up if this isn't it. Code style, C#. Oh no, that's just white space. All right, last attempt. File templates. C# class. Yeah, so this is what I want it to do, but it's not doing it. All right, I'll look into that later. Okay. Chunk invalidation handler obviously needs to know the chunk that it's being produced for. No, public. Okay, hang on. New constructor. This is going to be called from fairly deep down in the protobuf code, I think, the netcode. So I'll try passing through protobuf types. So we've got an ID is going to be message ID. We're going to have a chunk, which I think is the protobuf chunk type. Okay. So yeah, this needs these two to be bound. Read-only field. That. And again, read-only field for that. We need a private. Chunk invalidation state. We do need some sort of an idle state actually, because I don't want to kick off the fetch from inside here. So I do need a way of saying state is going to be equal to idle. Okay, I'll have a public async task called start to do trigger the fetch. State is going to be fetching. And a private async task. I'm not sure if this needs to be async or not, this one. On result. And what does this do? This can then say that the state is equal to act. To do send out, make sure we start sending acts. Okay. That all seems fine. So this will get called this will get created when we originally see an on-chunk invalidation. It will dispatch the actual request to fetch the entities or cause that request to go out. It will then wait until it gets a result from here and internally call onResult. And then we also need a way of triggering this. Okay, I'm going to add another state, just called complete. This can become a property. We're going to need to call that externally, detect the chunk invalidation becoming complete. Public void on ACK from server. Some of these states might go away. I'm not convinced that this one will stay. I've got a feeling whoever's calling into this class will know as soon as it calls this method that it has been cleaned up. Okay. So we need a way of doing this. We need a way of triggering the axe. So I'm going to create a new class for this one first. We've already got code to do this. I just got to wire that up. But this is the more interesting piece at the moment for getting this design implemented. So let's do it. Alt insert, create a class. Invalidation, I am going to call this one a manager because this is doing a kind of a broader management of the whole system. Now this needs to be able to receive, this just needs to be able to see every message that is going out to, coming in from the server, sorry. It'll just get passed in here so that this can kind of sip from the fire hose and work out what it needs to do. So the very first method here is public void process message from server. Well, just make it process message because we have a server message type, so it's obvious this is coming from the server. Message. So this needs to do a few things. Pull out the chunk invalidations and work out which ones are already in progress. The easiest way to do that is going to be to have a private dictionary from chunk to I need to look up how C# manages identity on these, but I'll keep on going here for now. Private chunk of that to a chunk invalidation handler, like that. Handler, I can't type, handlers. Once we've pulled those out, we need to create new handlers for new invalidations. Before we do any of this, and this will make sense in a moment, we need to process ACK from the server. Now, the reason this is important we do it first is this. When something is in the ACT state and we see that there's a new on-chunk invalidation coming in, we're saying that we're going to ignore it because we don't know whether or not the server has seen our chunk invalidation. So we assume that this one is for it's a repeat. We're basically assuming it's a repeat because we don't know the server has seen our acknowledgement yet. However, if in the one packet, the server acknowledges one of these messages and sends us a chunk invalidation, then we know that this is a new chunk invalidation. So we actually want to process these ACKs first so that in the one step we can effectively go, oh, we've got an ACK from the server, oh, but we've got a new chunk invalidation, and we know this is a fresh one. If we don't do this, then what we'll do is we'll ignore the on-chunk invalidation. We'll send we'll see the acknowledgement come in from the server. And then it won't be until the next frame that we come around and see the new chunk invalidation request come in and have to process it anyway. So it's quite important we do this first. Process X from the server first. I'll just document this because otherwise this is a bug waiting to happen. It's not a huge bug, it's just a bit of a performance-based for no complexity. Process X from the server first. If there's a all right. So we process the X from the server. That may involve doing something in here. We pull out the chunk invalidations, and then we check in here. Welcome back, random guy. We pull out the chunk invalidations, make sure we're not already performing the invalidation. And then we create new handlers for any invalidations that survive this filter. Yep, still working on the MMO. I decided that the code I was doing yesterday towards the end of my stream was absolutely terrible and was not going to work in the right direction for solving the problems. Now, this processing the ACKs from the server is a little bit funny because we need to be able to map from... I'll just... I'll just do it as part of the to-do. From the client message ID to the chunks we act in that message. So this is going to need another piece of state. It needs to be able to do this lookup. It needs to know, for a given client message ID, it needs to know which chunks. Thank you, random guy. Thanks for the like on the stream. No idea if YouTube pays attention to it, but it can't hurt. Yeah, we need to be able to look up the chunks that were ACKed as part of this client message. So I need two things. I need a way for the UDP packet generator to notify us what it's sending to the server. So it needs to be able to read client messages that are going out. I will rename these. I know that I don't need to, but it'll be a bit clearer. This is process message from server, process message from client. To do record the invalidation acts we're sending out. Yep, the MMO world is kind of infinite, that's right. But not on the client. On the client side, it's only got the least amount of stuff loaded as possible. And this is just the way of getting the client to be able to load those new chunks as the player moves around. Make sure it can load them without having to saturate the UDP channel, because that's just wasteful, and I don't want to make the if you think this is complicated, the protocol changes for UDP to get it reliable enough and performant enough are just not worth it. Okay, so here we need another dictionary. This is going to go from message ID. This is the client message ID to a set of chunks. Hash set of chunks. And this is going to be chunks by client message ID. Handlers by chunk. Oh, let's do that as a rename so I don't have to do it manually. Handlers by chunk. There we go. All right. This part's really easy to do. We know this function only ever gets called once per message ID. We've got no, this stuff is coming local. It's being generated locally, so we know that it's a reliable connection. So all this has to do is do chunks by client message ID dot add. We need to give it the message ID. Just before I continue, I'm just going to put a to-do up the top here. Double check how identity works in C#. Dictionaries and sets. Yeah, my concern here is that if I've got two instances of chunk with the same U and V values, I just need to make sure that that's actually going to treat them as equal. Otherwise, I need to use a different type in there. But in here, we just take each of those message IDs, and then we're going to pass it message.chunk invalidation acts, and then we're going to select the coordinate for that act. Seems fair. So it literally just pulls out all the coordinates that it's sending X back for, and yeah, just stores them against that client ID. Okay, process an ACK from the server. This needs to get the message, the client message ID that's being acknowledged by the server. So var client ID is going to be message.ack Really? What am I missing here? I thought there was a field. Is that not in my protocol? That would be a bit embarrassing. Easy enough to add. Oops. Yeah, so the client is able to acknowledge messages from the server, but the server can't acknowledge messages from the client. That is a bit of an oversight. Now, since I've not deployed anything here, I can renumber these things. Normally, you should never renumber your messages in Protobuf, because otherwise, old clients won't be able to talk to new ones. Once these numbers are being used externally by binary, they really are set in stone. Which is fine, I just need to change that to a 4 normally, but I'd rather keep these looking a little prettier for now. Okay, I need to do, how do I do my protobuf build? Something like that. There we go. Now over here, this should now have an ACK. There we go. So that is the client message ID being acknowledged by the server. Now over, I'm going to have to get like Trello out or something because I'm starting to get too many to-dos and things. Let's quickly do that. Not logged in? Why not? I'll do this off screen. Don't want to risk giving away anything I shouldn't. There we go. Player falls through terrain, floating scatter, and check type safety of component attributes. Let's leave all of those. Let's add a card here. Client-side ACK processing is what I'm working on at the moment. And I'll just add a to-do list, a checklist. There we go. Called to do. On the server, make sure we're hacking on receipt of a UDP packet. Because we are definitely not doing it at the moment, since I didn't even have the field there. What was the other thing I had at the top of the class? That was check how C# dictionaries and hash sets handle identity. Okay. Completed invalidations is going to be the client ID or just an empty set. So if the server has just acknowledged a message from us, we look that up in our little dictionary here, which should hold the list of chunks that we said we have successfully received. And so these can actually just be removed, which slightly simplifies our handler. It doesn't need to know about getting the ACK back from the server, because we're just going to do that straight in here. We can just do completed invalidations. I want to do for each, which I can't easily do on a hash set. So I'm just going to make it a list. This one has to be a new list. Down here, this needs to be to list. Now I can do for each. And then chunk is going to do handlers by chunk dot remove chunk. I can probably replace all of this just with a function reference, just like that. No. All right. Whatever. I thought I worked out yesterday that I could just bind it, but I'm not too fussed. All right. I can get rid of that to do just because I've got that in Trello. That's really all that's needed when we get a message back, when we see an acknowledgement come back from the server. Just going to move this into another method. Extract a method called handle act from server. There we go. Nice. Pull out the chunk invalidations and work out which ones are already in progress. This is easy. We just do message dot chunk invalidations dot select not. There we go. So that is selecting things that we do not currently have a handler for. Oh, sorry, that's not meant to be select. That's meant to be where. Sorry, I really don't like the link naming. I don't know who was first with it, but I presume the JavaScript stuff came from, I can't remember which language it would have come from, but you know, dot filter and dot map are so much more standard than dot where and dot select, and they're mathematically more correct as well. Okay, for each in here we've got invalidation. And all this has to do is handlers by chunk dot add invalidation dot coordinate. We need a message ID, message.id, and we need the chunk coordinate. Okay, let's just get this slightly factored. What does this piece of code do? It so this one is just going to create new handlers. Handle new invalidations. Extract method. Handle new invalidations. Each of these needs to get started as well. So I'll put this out as a handler, and we'll do a handler.start. This is async. I can't remember how to do this. Well, what I might do, I might make this non-async, and whatever this does it'll try and make it async. I'll try and make it synchronous. I'll sort that out later. Okay. I need to implement the actual handler. These two to-dos here that are going to be important. How do I handle async stuff elsewhere? So here's one. We do a query async. Process message from server. Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that we're going to get a warning on the code I write in here because this is going to, somewhere down the chain, this is going to trigger an asynchronous request. But we just want to let that asynchronous request go out and get processed whenever it gets processed. Like I don't think I want to bind state in here. I've got to think about this. Let's trigger this fetch. I'm going to make a new class called a chunk data fetcher. You've got to implement the laser in your puzzle game. It's yeah, it's somewhat important to the game. What does this need to do? I'm going to think of the best way of doing this. I'll make this be async. No, I need to start thinking about how this is going to feed back into the rest of the system. Let's see where else I'm doing this invalidation currently. Okay. Okay, I need to be a bit careful here. When this happens, no, sorry, when something gets act, I do have a to-do here. Make sure we start sending acts. So we need some way of notifying or modifying the message to make sure that the message gets processed. Sorry, make sure that the acts go out to the server. That's actually really easy, right? Remote. Hang on. I think we can get rid of that. And back in the manager, when it processes a message from the client, I think we want it to actually send the acts in here because we've got access to this message. So what I can actually do in here is message dot chunk invalidation acts. We're going to append to that. What will we append? Well, it'll be the handlers by chunk. Can I pass it 2 parameters in here? No, I don't think I can. So we have to do an entry. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Oh, no, that's right. It's actually really good. I want to do the same thing down there. And I want to encapsulate this one as well. Wait, no, not remove. I want to encapsulate. State needs a private set. All right. Entry dot key var handler is entry dot value. I suspect one of those is not needed. Return handler dot state is equal to act. Okay. So this finds anything that's in the act state, which are things that we have finished processing, but we've not been told the server knows about us knowing yet. And then get rid of that. I suspect this just goes away. Entry.value. There we go. So we're doing a where on that, and then we're going to do a for each. We have to do it to list. For each. Sorry, I'm a bit all over the place again. Like entry goes to entry dot value. In fact, can I just do dot values on here? Yes. Dot values where handler goes to handler dot state to list for each. And in here, beautiful. Today I plan on streaming a fair bit longer. I'll probably grab have a 5-minute coffee break soon, but I expect to be going another hour or two today. See how much I can get through. Okay, so for each chunk that we have sitting in the act state, we need to generate an act packet for it. That's pretty easy. We just need to give it a coordinate, which is handler.chunk. We need to give it a message ID, which is... oh no, we've got that. We can get that from the handler as well. Beautiful. Okay. Process message from client is not being called. Oh, that's, yeah, still needs to be called. That's all right. So when we do get ready to send a message out from the client to the server, we're going to look at it. We are going to this is definitely not right. We're responsible for filling this out. Okay. Oh, my audio is way different, is it? Not sure why. I might just be talking quietly. I need to keep an earpiece off at the moment because I'm expecting a delivery and want to be able to hear my doorbell, so I might be speaking differently with my earphone, with my headphone off. Volume looks normal. Oh, perhaps a touch loud. Hang on. Testing. Volume. Yeah, that seems a bit better. I might have been clipping just before. Okay. Let's just do it like that. Okay, that looks, I think I just needed that in the correct order. It's your computer, is it, Random Guy? Yeah, everything's looking mostly okay. Maybe my volume was a little bit funny, but my encoding stats all look fine. Okay, this is the next code to implement. Hello, testing. Can you hear me, Random Guy? So what I need to do next is find my existing code for handling the chunk invalidations. I have no idea where that is. But I need to then port that to my new stuff. Process message from server. It's definitely going to be somewhere in here. Here we go. For each chunk invalidation, it currently goes off, works out what it's going to fetch. Okay. I'm just going to grab all of this code in here. Yeah, this is a problem in here. I'm going to have to use events or something in here. I also have the problem, I have this problem here. I've got a feeling I might need to get rid of this distinction between static entities and entities. It's unlikely to save me much. All right, I'm going to cut the distinction out for now. I'm just going to put in this code. Here's my query parameters. This is the thing that matters. Invalidation handler. Just going to grab this code. Uh, I've never had one of the extended warranty things. I suspect it's a difference between America and Australia. It's probably something different in the way that our trading works. I did have someone telling me I was getting access to a half price iPhone. Single bad joke, random go. You're allowed one a day. I'd hate for you to run out. Hello, Chris P. I'm close to taking a 5 minute break here, but you have 175 of them. Okay, I think I'm going to lock out this concept of static for now. I'm going to create an issue in here, work out if the static versus dynamic how do you organize an astronomer's party? What am I doing? I feel like I should be able to get this one. Star, galaxy. No, no idea. How do you organize an astronomer's party? I've got a feeling I'm going to like this one, or very much not like it. We planet. Oh, yeah, I quite like that one. My kids are going to cop that one. Okay, so I can't afford to do a weight in here. Can you... I need to try and remember how to handle tasks. So I actually want to set basically a callback on this task. I don't want to await on it. And the reason for that is, yeah, I guess here's my problem. This starts to get pretty ugly. If this method isn't async, then we have no way of cancelling these operations or knowing that something's been deleted. So I'm going to make it async. And then make it up to the invalidation manager to handle the parallelization of these. Maybe it'll just store these or something. C# task event on task completed. There is a task completed event. Cool. Okay, so I will do this one all asynchronously. So we await there back in the manager when we call start. No, we can't call complete. What? because I'm not returning the task. Hold on. Let's see. Task. No, I've not really looked at how much data is sent. At this point, I'm not too worried about it. I'm not expecting this to be um, a mobile game. Um, so if it's a megabyte or two of data coming across with world initialization, I'm not too concerned. There's a bunch of stuff I can do to optimize it as well. So the client could cache terrain and keep track of when it fetched each chunk of terrain. And then the server could store against each chunk of terrain when it was changed. So they could negotiate between themselves as to whether or not terrain needs to be loaded. Definitely, the terrain is 99% of the data coming across. The other thing I can do, of course, is at the moment it's all just sending across as JSON. And I could move to what's called gRPC, I think it's called, which uses protobuf. So instead of HTTP and JSON, I could use protobuf over gRPC. And that would massively reduce the amount of data being sent across, just because it's less verbose, it's easily compressed. I think it's compressed by default in gRPC. But yeah, it should be fairly easy to reduce it down a lot with just caching the data. Static data, I could probably also use that same caching trick. As long as the entity server is able to store the timestamp of when the last change was made to a static entity, then there's no longer a need to send that data across on every single load of the game. I can probably get a quick estimate though of how much data it is per chunk. Let's actually do that. It's the client fetches the mesh, which is 43 kilobytes at the moment for a single chunk. So that's not as bad as I thought it was. Um, uh, Number of objects, a couple of hundred as it comes up. So it'll be, assuming that the current view is roughly, maybe it's about three, maybe there'll be like 3 times as many items per chunk as I currently have, because I've only got trees and rocks at the moment. So at the moment, if we take a chunk query at the moment, so this is one of these chunk invalidation requests, C minus C. So each chunk of entity data at the moment is about 9 kilobytes. So all up, it's currently a bit under 64 kilobytes. So maybe it'll be 256 kilobytes of data per chunk. So that's a couple of megabytes as you come up. That's ballpark figures. And of course, as you run around the world, it'll also have to keep on streaming that data. So the 9 kilobytes, I'm not too worried about. Having to do 43 kilobytes every time you walk into a new chunk, and it's not just that one chunk you're going to be loading. You're going to have to load like the 3 new surrounding chunks. So that's like 150 kilobytes anytime you move between chunks. So yeah, that's actually not as bad as I thought. Especially once I get compression in there. I'm slightly surprised at how small they are actually. Okay. So I'm still trying to work out how to get these tasks to collapse down. I don't want to use the Unity coroutine stuff, just because it causes some really tight coupling between Unity and this completely non-Unity code. I don't want that. Where's my writer gone? There's writer. So I just need to find, is there like an event or... Yeah. I'm tempted to just do this for now. I've got a feeling this warning is pretty bad though. CS4014. Just see how serious it is. Fire and forget, someone said. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. So they've got an async here that they're doing some work in the background. This is really similar to what we're doing. The difference is that I'm concerned that one of these tasks might complete, and the owning function might it might go off and get deleted or delete this object. Oh, this looks good. Are there any comments saying you really shouldn't do this? For anyone looking at C# stuff on Stack Overflow, I strongly recommend listening to anything John Skeet has to say. Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay. So the warning here, execution of the current method continues before the call is because this call is not awaited. Execution of the current method continues before the call is completed. That's exactly what I want. So apparently, I can just do that to shut up the warning. And this is fine because the handler is absolutely fine to go off and do its own thing. If the handler gets deleted or destroyed or whatever, then nothing, there's no problem. If the owning code gets destroyed, there's also no problem. Because, yeah, we're just letting it go off and do its own thing. This is fine. So back to here. We pull out the entities. We need a way of wiring up an event handler. Fire an event so that the datagram generator, no, so that the entity store, the local entity store, can see the new entities. So that's fine. We also need to call onResult. Chunk invalidation state.act. I'm going to rename this to fetched. So we've got fetching and then fetched. Okay. So what we've done is we've seen, okay, we've received an invalidation. We go off and trigger a query from the entity service. And then this will get sent back somehow. I'll sort that out in a second. This will get sent back to the session or something like that. The whatever's managing the remote entities will get notified that some remote entities need to be updated. And then we set the state to fetched. Now, it feels weird setting the state twice in here, but this is an async function, so this makes complete sense. Coming back to the manager, we come in here, we call start. So we just get each of the invalidations. We just trigger one of these requests out to the entity service. So these will all go out in parallel because this is async. Then new invalidations. Then separately, whenever we generate a client message, so this is still not wired up, but once we do this, it is going to go through and look at each of the handlers, which has been updated in here. It's going to find any that are set to fetched, and it's going to generate an ACK message for them. Perfect. So we've only got two things left to do here. One is wire this up, and the other one is wire this up. So the first thing I'm going to work on is this, because this is, I think, the slightly more complicated case. Oh, hold on a second. Am I also wiring this one up yet? Oh, I've got to wire this one up as well. Well, I suspect this and wiring up the process message from server is going to be very closely related. Because I think I'm going to need an on entity result listener to get passed in here. Invalidation result handler. let's just write this code. So I'm going to create a new class in here. I'm just going to call it invalidation result, actually. A new struct, in fact, invalidation result. And this needs we need to know the chunk coordinate. And we need to know, let's make it public. We need to know the entities that have come in as part of this invalidation. Public event avert an action of invalidation result on I'll make the handler have an event on it, which will be just the entities that came back. Is that spell received? Yep, I think so. Okay, so whenever we receive entities, we go and call this event handler. Whenever we create one of these, we say on entities received plus equals new invalidation result. Let's just tidy all of this up. Entities equals entities and chunk coordinate. Oh, right. Is this all correct? When we receive the result, we fire this handler, which then fires this handler. So whoever owns this just needs to set this. This is looking pretty good. Hold on, where does that get called? Here we go. Presumably, this new kind of handler thing, chunk invalidation manager, is going to be owned up here. I'm out of coffee. I'm going to have a cut at getting this wired up, and then I'm going to replace my coffee. Something's not quite sitting right in my head here. I'm slightly concerned about how little code I brought across from this big block here. Now, to be fair, I have kind of lopped out this concept of dynamic and static entities for now. Does this for loop exist in my other code? Message.chunkinvalidations, message.chunkinvalidations. So that for loop exists. Just with a lot less calls because of this where. But that's good. That's just this is very inefficient. So we do have this for loop. I've lopped out all of this. We know that we're fetching entities in our new code because it's got that state that updates all of that. This is no longer relevant. This has been ported. This has been ported. Here is where I have not ported anything. But here's the cool thing. All of this code, including the for loop, goes away. This code gets called once some entities come in. I'm just going to put a brace in there just to put 2 braces in here just to get the indenting right. Okay, find out which entity IDs are where. So this is just doing some indexing of some sort. Remove objects for removed entities. So if we know of any items in that chunk, then, and it's not in that entity list coming back, then we have to delete it remotely, locally. If, for everything else, we go through and do the update. Acknowledge the chunk invalidation we no longer need to do because that's being handled elsewhere. Then it goes off and does the actual entity updates. Okay. So I think I want to take this code here. Just cut that out for now. And this is going to go live somewhere else. Do we have a constructor on here? No. In fact, let's just throw it in start. Configure invalidation listener. On invalidation result, chunk coordinate. And this needs to be just one of those result objects, doesn't it? Oh no, this is fine. Entity array entities. And then what I'm going to do I not create some... Oh, my code's not compiling. What have I done? There we go. Invalidation manager dot that plus equals result is going to go to on invalidation result. Wow, this is starting to look a bit simpler. A lot of refactoring I can do in here still, but this is starting to look a lot better. Oh, this is this is wrong. This won't work once I deploy to the cloud. But anyway, ooh, glad I saw that one. That was definitely broken. I wonder how many problems I have like that. Okay. On invalidation result, entity index currently goes from string. No, that should be a UUID. I suspect there's going to be a bit of work to getting this in sync. ID is currently string. No, that needs to be a new UUID. This function shouldn't exist. Played sounds can use UUID. Yeah, this really should have been done. All of these changes should have been done yesterday. I don't know how I overlooked this stuff. New UUID there. Okay. Server manager has a problem now in that, yep, that is the UUID type. New data is, that is meant to be a toString. Local entity set should be, these should be UUIDs. I'm going to need to apply an equality. No, hold on. I need to work out how identity works in hash sets. C# hash set identity. What is the default equality comparer? Okay, object.equals and object.get hashcode is what I want. So UUID does need an equality comparer and a hashcode equals, I want to give me an equals. Generate equality members. Oh, this is nice. Wow. This is why I like Rider. Can I do it for hashcode as well? Be nice. I see. Let's just do that. This is fine because this is the thing that does the actual equality. And yep, that makes perfect sense. I did generate a hashcode. Non-read-only field referenced in get hashcode. That's a nice warning. This should indeed be read-only. UUIDs never change in my implementation. Prototype, yep, let's rename that. And that can be made read-only. All right. So UUIDs I can now correctly store in hash sets. All right, my stuff seems to be mostly compiling. Get rid of anything I don't need. I don't use this. Never used. Cool. This does not need to be async. In fact, I don't think it actually returns anything. So let's just make that a void. Nothing to do in there. Just clean up these warnings. Don't need that. Yep, don't need that line. We never do a get on this. It's pretty funny. Wow, I've never seen that before. Hang on a second, what does that do? This is going to take configuration and say if it is undefined, then define it. That's really cool. I've not seen that syntax before. Just about done here. Field can be made read-only. Yep, do that all through this file. Rename it. Component. There we go. All right. Sorry, I do like to go through and clean up my warnings sometimes. And this can be made static. Okay, everything compiles. I'm still not fully wired up though, because back on the manager, I still don't process the message from server, and I still don't process the message from client. So I'm going to quickly take a 5-minute break, make myself some more coffee, and then I'll get this stuff wired up. I just need to get my timer set up, and I will see you all in a bit under 5 minutes. Almost got under the 5 minutes. Okay. While I was making my coffee, I was actually realizing that even once I've got this code wired up, it's probably not going to quite work. And the reason for that is over on the server, I'm still not calling into this apply delta code. Well, it says it's being called, but this code's not very well tested or anything. So I'll need to, we'll try running it once it's wired up and just see what state it's in. It's possible I got that implementation right. The apply delta isn't nearly as complicated as the generate delta. Okay. Process message from server is going to happen, I presume, over on one of these. Yep. So here's where the server gets its message. We probably want to process the invalidations first. Not sure. I don't think it really matters. Invalidation manager dot process message from server message. So that will just handle the invalidations. Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of code in here that gets run on each entity update, and it has a lot in common with this code up here, which is when an invalidation result comes in, because they're pretty similar, except the difference is that that lower one down here is dealing with deltas and might include deletions, for example. But over up here, it never has to apply a delta. But there is a lot of commonality between those two pieces of code. All right, where do I send something out to the client? I've got a feeling that lives in remote session. This is what I mean about having just code scattered across these two classes. Update. No, this looks like it's going to generate a message. Yep, here we go. Client message. So this will go and do all the acts. Do I do any invalidation work in here? We come through, we calculate the player entities stuff. We look for any entities with a remote command request on it and send those through. I don't send through any acts in here, which is fine because that gets done in here. So I was expecting to have to delete some code there, but apparently not. Okay. I mean, I've got nothing here to do but to try it out now. Oh, I really shouldn't leave my client running like that. Yep. This code can all go. I am not using that stuff anymore. That was yesterday's code that I was so hungry and not thinking straight. It's not normally how I go about writing software. What I've ended up with today, I'm much happier with. Chunk data fetcher, I didn't end up using. That needs to be block scoped. That needs to be block scoped. And lastly, cleared that up. What's its problem here? That needs to be block scoped. All right, it compiles, and it probably won't work here. I see no entities coming in. And that is because, oh, what have I got here? Oh, completely lost my console. Hang on, I think it's just on another window. I've got no idea what I've just done here. Well, we've got a null reference exception anyway. Line 345. So somewhere in this block, we're getting a null pointer exception. My guess would be entity ID. Yeah. So session details entity ID is not set. Yeah, this is a bit frustrating. I wonder if I can tell the JSON deserializer. So the issue here is I've got these UUIDs, which are my built-in type, and I try to parse this. So what I really want to do is find out how to do a custom deserializer. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna have to deal with it and just make all of these strings. Which means I need to undo some of the changes I made just before. They're not too bad though. I was only those two. It's not so bad. Yeah, so what was going on there is the server sends those entity IDs when the client first connects, and we were trying to deserialize the JSON, but the JSON parser doesn't know how to deserialize my UUID objects, so it was falling over. I'm sure there's some way I could tell it how to deserialize those, but that would be cleaner. Let's just try and get this working though. How do I get this reattached? Reattach down here. Layout, default. Ooh, my coffee is definitely ready. Pressing down the French press here. If I don't get my coffee, then I quickly get in a bad mood. So that's for the best. There we go. So it's still not working. I don't have the null pointer exceptions anymore. But it's now time to, I think I'll just throw in some, am I going to use breakpoints? Or throw in some log messages? Let's do breakpoints. The invalidation manager, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be calling in here. So let's just get a breakpoint and see what it's receiving. Ah. All right. I'm very surprised about that. Let's run it again. We are attached to the debugger. What's our server doing? Maybe the server's not up properly. Oh, that was it. The server wasn't running. All right. Run this again. Still aren't getting entities. Breakpoint here. I expect to see a bunch of invalidations. No errors. I'm a bit confused here. So I've got this command here that I've used before, which is just find any entities with a player component. And we definitely have one. So now we can ask for that session. And what can we see? It's been registered, but it's never been seen. There's normally a time last seen in here, which means that the server is not seeing any UDP packets. All right. It also means that session's going to die shortly. Yep, already gone. And oh, we still have a player entity. Yeah, that's a bit strange. Oh, okay. So yeah, the client is realizing it's not seeing anything coming in from the server, and after 60 seconds, it's gone, I'll just try reconnecting. So it's going to keep on trying to reconnect. So I've got to work out why those packets aren't going out. Now, I believe we're never getting packets from the... Is it that the client's never sending them, or is it that the server is messing up? Oh, we've got a breakpoint over here. Oh, that's a bit embarrassing. Okay. So I had a breakpoint in the server, in the bit of code that was generating the datagrams. So the client was never seeing anything come from the server. All right, let's try this again. We've seen a message come in from the server. It doesn't have an ACK. I don't think I considered this case. Let's step in. Sure enough, that is not going to be happy. Let's change this code and just say if client ID not equal to null, then do that stuff. If we don't have an ACK, then the server's never seen a packet from us, so we can ignore it. Of course, this code will now never run because I haven't written the code that actually populates this field yet. That's going to be easy to do though. At least make sure that everything kind of comes up. I think we expect the entities to load. We should see the entities load once this code's working. There we go. Let's just fix that code. Things will not work if my UUID code is broken. I don't know what's going on with that player just there. Okay. You can see that it is just fetching over and over again. It keeps on receiving new entities, keeps on fetching more entities. This is to be expected because the server is not processing the acknowledgements from the client properly yet. So does that make sense? It doesn't really make sense. Let's try that again. So what do we expect to be working at the moment? Server sends the invalidations to the client. Client goes and fetches the entities. Client will send an acknowledgement for the original server packets. It'll also send invalidation acknowledgements for each of the chunk invalidations. Ideally, the server will see those acknowledgements, update the client state, and stop sending those invalidations through to the client. The client may well fetch things multiple times just because of the lag. Let's see. I wouldn't expect it to fetch for more than a second or so though. So it comes in, received some extra meshes. That's looking really promising. So it's fetched all the entities. See, this is each of the chunks loading up some entities. However, it's then stopped doing them. So as long as I don't have some weird breakpoint or errors over on the server, this is all looking pretty good. Oh, these are okay. This is just some sessions expiring. Wow, there's lots of them. But no, it's all looking pretty healthy at the moment. And running the client again will just confirm that. Let's do that. It'll confirm that everything's happy. I'll clear out the log, start this up again. I just want to make sure that we're not getting errors all over the place, because that's the only other explanation for either we're getting errors on the server or this is behaving as we expect. There we go. That's really nice. Awesome. So next, I need the client to stop sending through the X. Let's just grab a packet coming in from the UDP receiver datagram processor. If we just go and grab a message, so here's a message coming from the client, and we have a look at the message, you can see that it still has these chunk invalidation acts. It shouldn't have these though after a while, after just about a second, because the server is meant to have acknowledged this update and this message. And so the client should see, oh, the server knows about these, I shouldn't be sending them through anymore. Now, I reckon this is as simple as needing to send through, when we report a sighting, we tell it which server ID the client has last acknowledged. I think we also want to send it through the client's message ID. So let's just come in here and call this one last server ID act. And this one is going to be last client ID seen. All right, I'll just throw some more properties on here. Server ID is going to be the last server ID. Let's do it in full. And last client ID seen. I had a UUID class on here. I do. Is that defined? It's in the netcode. Okay. I've got to remember how to write TypeScript now. It is there. I need that. Is uuid.fromproto that. Um, All right. So then over on the session server, I need to add these two parameters. Let's just go like that and like that. I'll add these two parameters to the report citing method in session controller. Oh, that's not right. Wrong function. Report citing. Where does that happen? Create session. Fetch all. Fetch. Oh, I bet you it just calls directly into update session. This is a bit dodgy. I think I'm doing my work over in the route. Report citing is fetching the session. Yep, here it is. Can I paste like that? No. Oh, that's not what I want. Okay, there's just a bit of boilerplate here to pass these parameters through. Add that. That seems right. In the client, am I doing anything with... Send through time scene. I just need to make sure this is actually going to do what I want. Yeah, last time seen, rec.body. Yeah, I think this will be right. Now we've got a problem over in here. That's because that needs to be a UUID from proto. Still not happy. Oh, it wants a proto ID. Yeah, it was already correct. What is its complaint then? Message.id. Oh, because it could be undefined. That can't be undefined. That would be a serious problem if that were undefined. It would be an invalid packet. I guess I should double check. If not message ID, then yeah, we need to get out of here because that would be a very malformed packet. Okay. What just died? Did something just die? Yes. Unity just died. Just waiting for Unity to run again. It seems to be doing a rebuild of something or other. Okay. Now we have no entities. Is that because I've hit a breakpoint? I've probably hit a breakpoint, haven't I? No. Oh, something's really not happy. I'd say that I've made a code change in there and it's failed to compile and hasn't noticed that I fixed the compile error. So this should push it back into shape. I really hope that these problems I have are just related to the development environment because I wouldn't want an error to cause the whole thing stack to fall over when it's in production. I'll find out pretty quickly if that's the case though, I guess. Just make sure we don't have any breakpoints. No, don't appear to. Oh, here we go. Cool. So we've got all our entities coming through. We are not repeatedly fetching the entities. And what else? I guess I need a breakpoint in here, make sure that the client isn't repeatedly sending through. It is. It's unfortunately repeatedly sending through the chunk invalidations. So, need to work out why that's not working. Oh, I never changed the code to send the ACK. Oops. UDP transmitter, this one's really easy. Datagram generator. When we do this, we've got a session. Yep, there's a session. Payload. Construct server message. delta.ack equals session.last client ID seen. Okay. Packet with bad hash, I'd say something has just died very badly. Something's very much not right here. It's going to start everything up again. Oh, what's this? UUID.match is not a function. Last client ID seen. Oh yeah, that's not. This doesn't look right. Where is that coming from? I wonder if I'm putting a completely invalid object in from the client. If I just check what my sessions look like. Yeah, this looks wrong. It is definitely not meant to be sending anything through like that. This is meant to be a string. So what am I doing wrong in there? It's probably a client-side bug. I mean, the server should be validating the data, but let's just sort this out. Oh, no, it can't be client-side because the client is sending this stuff over protobuf. So it cannot possibly be a client-side bug. So it must be a bug in the UDP receiver, in the datagram processor. Message ID is a protobuf ID. Here we go. This should be .to UUID string. Still not working. Oh, because I've got some bad sessions. Delete all my sessions. Oh, that will have totally messed up this client. Reconnector. That should stop those errors at least. Yep, that stopped those errors. Reconnect the client. And then these old sessions. All right. Debug the client, the receiver. Here we go. I've got a good feeling about this. I'm hoping we have no chunk invalidation acts coming from the client now. Where do I need to breakpoint? It's in the datagram processor, just here. Oh, this is looking good. There we go. No chunk invalidation acts. Now, the best part is we can demonstrate that we are actually sending some back. Let's put a... I can just leave that breakpoint there. And I'll run the client. And we should see a message go out. Here's the message. And this has... Oh, there's a message coming in. It has no chunk invalidation acts. We hit F9 again. Hit F9 a few times. Well, we're definitely seeing the chunk invalidations come in. Why have I got two of those? Can we pull that out and close it? Oh, wait, there we go. It's not fetching the entities over and over again, so it must have sent the chunk invalidations. The client must have sent the acts back. The server has then acknowledged that packet, and everything is now in sync. The server knows that the client can see everything. So the last test to do here, really, before I'm willing to call this fairly large push on the netcode kind of done, still need to check my to-dos, that's okay. But I just want to have a second client. So I'm going to do a build. This build will likely fail. Yep, that failed. Yeah, I've seen this before. Oh no, this is fine. Just tell it to do that. Sometimes I get extra includes that are not... I don't have the assembly in my... I can't remember the terminology, but sometimes I'll end up with weird using clauses up in here, and it can't build the client. There are things from the editor, for example. But if I just tell this to do a cleanup of my code, let it go through, find all the unused imports and things. Then do a build. Before it does a build, can I... Oh, I don't want to do that. Good. File, build settings. I do want to put this in a different location. I do that. I think I just hit build here. Yes. And then I'll create a new one called 1.22. What do I call it? 0.1.22.1. And then save it. Here we go, fingers crossed. I hope that I can see players moving around. Unity builds are not fast. I mean, I've got a bit of a beast of a machine here. Got like 24 cores, 64 gig of RAM, and this thing still takes forever. Come on. Here we go. All right, so that is running on another screen. And then I'll run it here on this screen. It's not working. No, I'm not seeing the updates. Worse, on my other screen, I'm actually seeing some flicker of something. All right, so something is not right. Yeah, I'm seeing flicker. I'm just going to bring the other window across. You can see there's a tree over there that's appearing and disappearing. That's... Oh. All right, so something is not right here. Oi. You can see here I'm standing on top of the one that's stuck in the ground. And if I go to my other window, okay, there's one behind there. Is that it? Could it be him? If he moves off to this side, we're never seeing him move. And if we stand here and go to the other window, we can't see that session. All right. That's unfortunate. Now, I don't believe this is an issue in the chunk, sorry, in the Delta generation, because I've got some decent unit tests around there. I'm going to have to put in some debugs. All right. Let's first confirm that this is a server-side bug. That's the most likely thing. And that's easy to confirm. I just need to see what a packet looks like that it's sending out and just make sure that it doesn't have any updates in it. If it has updates, then this is a client-side bug. So let's do the UDP transmitter, look at the generator, and this line here is where we send out the... Oh, what's that doing? Something's not right. Run that again, see if we get all those errors. Errors would definitely indicate that there's a problem on the server. Okay, that's up and running. Here we've got a message about to go out. It does have some entity updates in it. 7 of them. Why 7? Hmm. That's a stone. Why would it be sending an update for a stone? Is it sending any invalidation? Chunk invalid? Yes, it's invalidating all the chunks still. All right, so this is not doing as well as I was hoping it was. All right, I think I'm going to have to debug this off stream. I have a couple of other things I need to do before I continue debugging this. But I expect I'll be moving on to something else from tomorrow. On the MMO, I'll do something working towards getting this thing playtested. So thank you everyone for joining. And until tomorrow, I'll